could still be refurbished, but it was condemned because of all the rust. And when I did my hammer test, right? There's another one I did in Chicago. This is like, I think it was 150 apartments in this big factory that got converted into apartments, into condos, not apartments, condos. And they wanted just a paint job price on this thing. So I said, let me walk it. You have the engineer's information. Yeah, here's the information. When you read his document, it says scraped and painted, and not anything about structure. I'm like, let me just walk it. So I walked it. Now, here's the king. Most fire escapes have a bracket underneath. This is one that suspends. See, from the top, it picks up the nose, diagonal. So the diagonals come down. And then they kind of bend, and there's a big screw that you basically, the nut goes from underneath and holds, right? So I must examine like 15 of these structures. This is what I found to the naked eye. And I said, I could pull bolts out with my hand. Look at the through rod. This is my rod coming down. Look, and there's a nut, there's an angle here, and there's a nut underneath, and this thing is all rotted out. There's the nut underneath, the thing's all rotted out. On all of them. And they just wanted a paint press and says, who's this engineer? And a lot of times it's one of those things, like you just said, is anybody teaching the inspectors on what a proper inspection is? Because a lot of times you'll call a very nice firm and a representative that has all the credentials in the world when you're looking at buildings. But when you give them the bastard child of egress as a job, you know who he sends? He sends the guy that's, makes photocopies. He gives this job to somebody because nobody wants this job. Nobody wants to go climbing up and over fire escapes because they're a deck of cards to begin with. And the last thing they want is basically soil their hands with, this is trash. So, and they can't make any money on it because you can't get the sexy $3,000 to $5,000, the $10,000 to $15,000 oversight package. You can't make 25 grand, you know what I'm saying? You jump $2,500 on this thing and they start calling the mayor. They're calling the fire chief saying, what's going on here? I've never had to deal with this fire. You guys have been in and out of my building, for the past 40 years, and all of a sudden now you got a problem with my fire escape? Get that all the time.
Look all the money they saved. They could have compounded interest for it, not be fair.
You got a freebie, that's what we sell, that's what we tell them. This is a housing prison, for kids 17 and younger. When you look at it, it looks like it just needs a paint job. When you look under it though, it's rotting off the building. And it's just a one story. Now, whenever we walk a fire escape, now this is from the being involved with a metallurgist on a case where a fireman fell through in New York City, that the case is going to come up, and he tells you, to grow a 1/4 inch of rust in most parts of this country, you need 25 years. You gotta leave it alone for 25 years, you'll grow just a 1/4 inch of rust in a connection. If you want 3/8 to 1/2 inch, you need about 40 to 50 years to leave it alone. Don't paint it, don't touch it, don't do anything. So this is why when we teach you how to inspect fire escapes, and we've done this with the line guys, in Elizabeth, New Jersey, we taught 400 line guys that do the pre-plans and stuff. We taught them how to become extra eyeballs for bad fire escapes. Because you guys pre-plan your buildings a lot. You can go down and start using these guys to find all these fire escapes that are out there. And we taught 400 guys in a 1-hour class, and just, in a 4-day cycle, they just, rotated all the guys through. But this is the kind of stuff. So how long did it take to grow that connection there, right? When I inspect the fire escape, I got to carry with me my little 3-pound hammer, because I got to do the ping pong test, because a lot of times you got all this kind of rust, right? And this thing, if you don't ping your hammers as you go up, what happens is I'm going to fall through these fire escapes, because this is what we do when we inspect the fire escape. So all that's not a load test. That is a safety test. Now when you guys walk up and down these fire escapes, right, you shouldn't ever be on a fire escape. You're going to look at a fire escape, and we're going to show you a very simple test. You're going to be from the ground, you look up, and there's all rust on it. Now, we're going to prove to you that rust starts at a connection and works its way out. Rust never starts outside and eats a connection, ever. We're going to prove that today. So if I'm looking up at a fire escape, and it's all rusted, all brown, how many years do you think it took to eat all the paint on that fire escape? At least 25 years, right? To eat every speck of paint off the fire. Where did it start? Inside the connection or outside the connection?
Inside.
Does that make every connection on a fire escape suspect? Why would you want to walk on something that's suspect? The second thing you're going to look at, and you already have the first violation you need to write. It's got no paint, took at least 15 to 25 years for it to get that way, so nobody's been maintaining it. You have a maintenance violation. And when you're ready to write your violation, you always write 3 words. Don't ever tell them about the loose tread. Don't tell them about the dangling bracket, because they'll fix those things. They'll make somebody come in and just fix that tread. Just fix that bracket. You say, repair, paint, test. And they're gonna call you back and say what?
What do you mean?
What do you want me to repair? You said, I don't have a clue, but I did notice one tread dangling, but have an examination done by a design professional. A report will be given to you and me, and at that time we will discuss the next step, whether or not I want engineer oversight, whether or not it needs a permit. Let's cover that very, very briefly. Do I need a permit to paint? No.
That's funny.
Never need a permit to paint. I can paint indefinitely. Never need a permit to paint anywhere in the country.
Well, for us, it's $4,200.
Oh, that's a different thing.
Yeah, if it's gonna. then
I
it's
know,
different.
I know you put this number, but normally in the United States, do you need to pull a permit to paint anything? That's where fire escapes have been hiding under. They've been hiding under paint. If I change a fastener, do I need a permit? It's general maintenance. It's part of the paint. So where do you think everybody's been hiding out for 50 to 75 years? So if you walk by me, you see me working on a fire escape, say, what are you doing? What am I doing?
Hiding.
I'm painting. You start painting right away. As I'm changing fasteners, if they say, hey, where's your permit? What do you say? I'm changing fasteners. Now, if the truck hit the fire escape, if I'm extending the balcony, what do I need? Permit. If I'm putting a hole in the wall, what do I need? Permit. But if I'm painting it, so now, it doesn't mean that you can't say any and all activity on a fire escape requires a permit. Okay? And a lot of times you do the structural work first, get it all signed off, then you're allowed to paint. So a typical $10,000 fire escape might have $6,000 worth of permittable structural activity, $4,000 worth of painting activity that's not permitted, that doesn't require a permit. That's the nationwide norm. So far, the NFPA says it best and the clearest. The authority having jurisdiction shall accept by load test or other satisfactory evidence of strength. And we're going to get to the evidence of strength in a second. But does that mean that the fire department can okay something only to have the building department come in and say, I want a load test? Does the code support the building department? That a fire escape shall be examined or tested? So even though you've okayed a fire escape, can the building department step in and say, I want a load test? Can it be reversed? Can the building department accept something only to have you walk in and say, I'm not satisfied, I want a load test? Well, the fire code says you can. Depending on the structural condition, a load test should be conducted. So there's really 2 people here that are gonna get satisfied, but usually in every state, there's always one that's, so here you guys write the violation, building department enforces the repair of it, correct?
Yes.
There's no enforcement by, you guys write the violation, you don't enforce it.
You'll Form 6, right, Jay?
Yeah, so we can rewrite it up, but most cases it's gonna be you need to get a permit from the building department, then they gotta get signed off by the building department.
Right.
There's basically 2 layers of the initial violation.
Right.
The fire department's going to watch that their violation gets closed out either by.
Yeah, but that's just
repair
watching
or
a file.
whatever.
Yeah.
They come to us for the actual permit to repair it. We're requiring certain.
Right.
And here's where we're coming in, so
Right.
they're watching a
They're
file.
inspecting the physical repair.
Right, they wrote a violation, they're watching a file, you go through its 30, 60, 90-day cycle, they're not going outside. You guys got a permit, so you're watching a file, because in 30, 60, 90 days, it's gonna close out. So what's missing here? Who's watching the,
Who's watching the hen house?
yeah, who's watching the hen house? You now bring the engineer, and that's why engineer oversight is critical, that during repairs, there must be engineer oversight, because you don't have staff to watch that, and you're paying an engineer to do 3 visits, an initial kickoff meeting, a mid-visit, and a final visit to verify what? The repairs. Either the spot repairs that will conclude in a load test, and you need to see the criteria for this load test, what it's gonna be, whether it's gonna be sandbags, water, or cabling. Or they're gonna go for the full refurb, and they've been there, the initial, the mid, and the final, to verify that every bolt was swapped out and that there's new connections into the building. And so now that you're back in your office watching the violation closeout, you're in your office watching the permit closeout, this engineer signs off at the end verifying all these 3 steps. All of a sudden now, when he sends that certificate into you and to you, what is still left to close out that permit? A building inspection walkthrough to inspect the fire escape or close the permit?
Close the permit.
Close the permit. So now the building inspector gets awakened and says, hey, it has gone through its complete process, a confidence test has been given to us to avoid the load test, and you need to go there and close the permit with the vendor. The vendor's there, okay, I did this, and the city official, here's a copy of the confidence test that the structural engineer signed off, here it is. And all of a sudden, the building inspector, the last guy to see the job, goes in and says, what the hell? Who? This is done? Yeah, it's done. This ain't done. Then the phone call goes out to the owner. The owner makes a phone call to the structural engineer, and everybody comes down and parties with you like, hey, what do you mean? 30 years, my credentials are extreme and blah, blah, blah. I says, oh, you're right. Just get something. I got a card here. Hold on a second. Load test. Like, what do you mean? It was very clear. A load tested or other satisfactory evidence to have adequate strength. I'm trying to be polite here. See the square bolt? That's old. See that square bolt? That's old. See that rust in that bracket that the guy basically welded it, which is, you can't based on EPA, and then he silicone shut it, but the bulge there is huge. You didn't see that? You charge these guys 3 visits to come and see what? So let's load test this baby. Oh, if you're saying she's fine for a load test, let me order a load test. Screw you, the fire, you guys don't know nothing. I'm gonna go speak with the head of the building department. Oh, go ahead, because he's gonna tell you, examine it or test it. And if you spot repaired and you left behind any original hardware on any major structural connection, not minor structural, so you can have little scrollies and stuff with, some rivets and stuff left on the minor stuff, call it minor structural. But if the major structural hasn't been 100% replaced or repaired, and I don't have evidence that you guys reattached this thing back into this 100-year-old grandma, I want a load test. Because I don't want the city to get sued, I don't want you to get sued, and I don't want the vendor to get sued. So let's perform a load test, and you guys know what it looks like when it passes, right? She stays up. You guys know what it looks like when it comes down, right? Well, you don't get that, you don't have to fix it anymore, you're replacing it now with a new one. Confidence test. So like I said, a lot of cities, the tri-state area, of all the places that really took off, New Jersey. We were hired by Kane, some call it Kane, some call it Keene University, which did all the fire prevention training in all of New Jersey. We did a 6-hour continuing education course. And out of all the places for it to explode and really start getting some traction was New Jersey. So if you say, what's happening in Manhattan, what's happening just across the river, classes all, and not from the state level down, grassroots. People say, hey, we can't wait anymore. What do we have to do? And basically, so we would create confidence tests. We changed some of the language, minor, and primarily, not on the generic information, we changed out the language primarily on the connection back into the building. And then we also threw the yearly test at them. And again, right, bolts are good, paint is good, and all the moving parts, the doors and windows are working. So this is that yearly, that basically reminds the owner and the owner's representative, because it's an agent. It's not a structural engineer that performs this yearly. So as you walk through and check your batteries and your smokes and this, that, and the other thing, and here's the best part, you'll love this, ready? You don't perform this test. You have the manager of the building basically test the fire escape for you. You'll love this part, right? You're on the sidewalk, and you say, hey, okay, I need that sheet. He goes, oh, let me sign it for you. He says, no, I gotta see it working. So please go to the roof, climb over the gooseneck, walk down all these stairs, activate the cantilever, then hand me the document. What's gonna happen on that yearly test from that maintenance guy or that testing agency? Because that's what they're gonna most likely call out. Not a structural engineer, but a testing agency to do that walk, or that's gonna give you the proof that the thing is functional, isn't it? So once a year, the cantilever gets used. Once a year, the ladder goes down. And who does it? Is it your men? You just want proof that it got done. Got it? So this yearly thing that Tacoma came up with this, we liked it. And it helps a lot. It basically keeps fire escapes on the front
So it's
burner
almost
every
like-
year.
Almost like having an annual conference.
It is, it's an annual.
Every 5 years. and
But
you
it's
know,
free. Look at the simple questions. You know what I'm saying? This is for the owner of the building to provide you, because he's also telling you that all his batteries are good on his exit signs. He's also telling that, that general 1-year walkthrough that you guys do, you ask for a copy of it. But now the main thing is that gooseneck going over, the coming down of the whole thing is very important. All the windows work, come out one of the doors. If you guys want, take a look down at, this was during a code change down in Portland. They've got everything down. They've got how to repair, clean, and paint fire escapes. Checklist. There's a lot of these questions are right off of your, okay, was not there before. So a lot of states, here's the tags and the departmental procedures and guidelines. This happened because we were teaching a class and there was a state fire inspector, a state building inspector in the class, and he says, because we thought we have to change code out there. You don't have to change code, you have to interpret the code with administrative rule or with departmental procedures and guidelines. Just sort of give me a layman's version of what the hell I'm reading here. And so the codes don't need to be changed. The codes are pretty simple. The authority having jurisdiction shall accept by load test or other evidence of strength. That has not changed in 75 to 100 years. The interpretation of it was when nobody got clear, and we are where we are today, and fire escapes just sort of got put to the backside. So you got buildings here that have gone through 2 or 3 cycles of change, electrically, roofing, plumbing, boilers, windows, in and out, sign outs, and the fire escapes never got $1, other than some paint money. Here's your tags. This is a 8.5 by 11 tag. So tags are tags. You can, how about your towers? This is a tower that I inspected. We inspect these towers nationwide, and this fire escape was in use by the trainees. Look at all the rust there. Look at all the rust there. And when I started hammer testing, look at all the treads. So a lot of times you guys are writing violations out, and you guys forget to check your own backyard. And a lot of your training towers, and they all have fire escapes because that's what you run across, are all rotted on the side of the building. It takes 25 years to grow a 1/4 inch of rust. How many years to grow this? Where this is a veterans home up on a hill in the Boston area. So if the war didn't kill you, Agent Orange didn't kill you, the fire escape is going to get you on the way out. Trash trucks, moving trucks, they whack these fire escapes all the time. And when fire escapes start falling like this by themselves, you know how many years it takes for you to ignore a fire escape and the treads, just through sheer weight of the treads, start falling? These are housing complexes, people, tenant, HUD or Section 8 housing. By the way, that last picture was a city hall, and there was treads missing on a city hall to the 3rd floor. This is a great case study. This is an actual fire escape that I bring to show and tell. I had this fire escape, and I was able to save it, a section, and use it to show all the wrong ways to fix a fire escape. So this is a fire escape buried in the ground. By the way, this was in an elementary school in use, and we took it down during Christmas vacation week. But it was used every day by kindergarten through 8th graders to get to the recess yard. Every day this fire escape was in use. It was 4 feet across, and we shrunk it down to a 2-footer. And we basically used it to basically capture in time just what we have here. So I bring this with me all the time to show what people did to it. And this is typical. When you got rust in the connection, weld the nose. And not by your certified welder, by Joe Welding guy, who knows how to melt a rod. Not weld, knows how to melt a rod. Got it? So here's a fire escape, and we basically shrunk it so we can carry it around to our shows. Lead paint. And this is how I found it the day I took it away. From the schoolyard during Christmas break. We only had 1 week. So there it is, in use, and this is what we replaced it with. We went to the right and along the wall down. So there's the replacement, and there's, so for the first time, you know, usually when you get there, you can knock these things down in an hour. I must have took 5 hours to slice a piece of this cake, you know, like I was trying to save it in its moment without having it fall apart on me so I can use it in shows like this. So, but this is an elementary school. So there's plenty of things out there ready to hurt the kids, hurt the tenants, hurt the firemen.
So is that considered a fire escape or a exterior stair?
The code, the building code is, and that's a very good question. The building code says all exterior steel or wooden stairs, fire escape shall be examined, right? Everybody thinks that all these codes are for a fire escape. The code, you're just starting with the tip of the iceberg, so get your feet wet on fire escapes. But you're about to open up a can of worms here that says, all exterior steel or wooden stairs must be examined. Like Chicago had 27 people die in a deck failure. There was just a recent deck failure that happened somewhere else that, was it Miami or something?
It was Miami, yeah. It was out over the swamp there, out the
Right.
exterior deck.
So all exterior steel wooden stairs must be examined. We're just focusing on fire escapes right now, but when you read the code, and the International Building Code, it's right on the, it's on this first page here. Massachusetts uses the building code. When you read it, it's clear right there. It says, all exterior bridges, steel or wooden stairways, fire escapes, and egress balconies shall be examined and/or tested and certified for structural adequacy and safety every 5 years by a registered professional or others qualified and acceptable to the building official, who shall then submit an affidavit to the building official.
I just asked that for our own jurisdictional, you know, between building and fire.
So that took about 25 to 50 years to grow that. So unless you guys all plan to issue a hammer to everybody, oh, you'll love what that one is. Let me show you what that one is. Second. The point that I want to make is just be careful of this. This is why we're going to teach you not to get on fire escapes.
Okay, I think that's it.
Got it?
But
So, where is this? Rutgers University. And I don't think this is a frat, but basically, there's got to be some students in that.
Is that fire?
And it's a fire pole. It's the only fire pole fire escape I've ever seen in the nation.
I've never seen it.
Have you guys ever seen a slidescape?
Yeah, I've seen pictures of it.
We examined the 12-story slidescape in Elizabeth, New Jersey.
What a ride.
Go down to a pool.
I'll show you that one. So it's part of the show. I'll show it to you guys in a second. So you guys, this is that thing in Bridgeport, like I said. This is a big complex of apartments surrounded by fire escape. The most important part here is that all the ladders jammed, nothing was functional, and all the people were stuck on a fire escape. And this is the critical photograph. This is from the news piece now. This is an 8-year-old girl. How many of you have taught your 8-year-old daughters, granddaughters, nieces how to, you know, go on a fire escape ladder? How many, because it's trapped up there, 10 to 12 feet, how many have you ever taught how to, an 8-year-old how to jump 8 to 10 feet? Oh, by the way, there's gonna be a fire behind you and all, you know, death is gonna be surrounding and yelling and screaming. So this is the important part that we have to get here, is that they have to be functional so people can self-evacuate. Whether you guys show up a minute, 10 minutes, or an hour late, it doesn't matter. Fire escapes, the first step is for people to self-evacuate. Then the problem is yours. And you guys can just surround and drown, or you guys gonna need it to get in, or you guys are gonna need it if all hell breaks loose to get out. The last thing you wanted the fire escape taking you when you thought you just got away to safety.
But right now, firefighters are taking down the ladders. But right now, firefighters are taking down the ladders and rolling up the hoses. But earlier in the night, when they pulled up, there were flames coming out of the side of the building. Firefighters say it was one of the scarier moments because when you pull up to a building and you see children and mothers hanging off the side of the fire escape, smoke swirling around them, they said that's scary, scary stuff. They got up there, they got the ladders up, and they said nobody got hurt.
The fire escape, there was 3 or 4 people hanging off the fire escape. They couldn't get off. They were just on the fire escapes. I had people hanging in the fire escapes at the rear of the building, and on this side of the building, we had a bunch of people on that fire escape.
Well, about 50 people were displaced inside
50
this building. I'm
people.
on a firefighters say there's good news tonight. It looks like everybody will be allowed to go back in except the one unit where the fire was in. They said that's good luck to them tonight. I'm Bob Wilson on the scene of Bridgeport, News 8.
So, what did he just say at the end there? He let everybody back into the building,
Except one unit.
back into the very building that doesn't have operational fire escapes? That's the good news? They reset the mousetrap, right? So, like I said, 3 to 6 months later, we were involved with this case, and we didn't, even though we were involved with the case and what needed to get done, we gave them a very thorough inspection of what needed to be done. We gave the fire marshal and the fire inspectors all the information they needed. You know what came of it? Nobody knows. I don't know, because the information was just too hot to handle, and to this day, we've never got confirmation of what ever got done there. But I'm pretty sure what got done there was a paint job and silicone. And that was 6 months after this fire, when we got the initial call. And what happens on these things? A lot of times, this is what we're gonna be talking about. This is information that we got from a Chicago building, I think it was 20+ stories. The initial investigation showed that it was all fine, they got it, they spent millions of dollars on the inside of the building. But one of the architects says, you know, I'm getting a lot of rusty tiers. See these rusty tiers? That's an indication that water's inside the building and it's working its way out. And when you look at the structure on the outside, see how solid it is, but then look how withered it is. See how solid it is, but then look how withered it is. See, withered, solid. Now, a lot of people don't realize that the veneer on a building is what everybody caulks and paints. It just seals up. They don't realize that the parapet wall has been feeding, because right between the real masonry wall, 2 or 3 layers of dirty brick or block, is what's really taking the attachment 8 to 12 inches deep. So what happens when the water gets back here, it eats the steel. And then it gives you an indication, because that 3/4 space between the veneer, held by these little tabs that hold the wall back up against the building, is where all the parapet wall is sending the water down year after year for 100 years. So if I was to load test this fire escape, what do you think the result would be? Got it? So you have some unknowns here, and only when you spend $300 to $500 per wall, per section, by a masonry company to come in there and touch these 100-year-old buildings and open up the wall and look inside and see what you really got. Or if I take a hole and I leave that alone, let sleeping dogs lie on the whole 100-year-old granny, and what do you put next to her? Put a cane, saying, Granny, we're not gonna operate here. We're gonna leave it alone. We see evidence, we see rusty tears, dragon's teeth we call them. We see rusty tears, so what we're gonna do is about 6 to 8 inches away, we're gonna drill a 3/4 hole all the way through the building, and on the inside, we're gonna put a plate, and then we're gonna mechanically fasten back to this baby. And we're gonna leave that alone. And whether it's at 100%, 66%, or 32%, we don't care. Because to satisfy this crazy inspectors here in Seattle, we need to provide them other evidence of strength. And this unknown in the wall, I'm not gonna spend $300 to $500 per wall when I can spend $50 to $75 per connection. And I was gonna use epoxy bolts into this you know, porous, old, 100-year-old wall, but you know what? Those hole inspectors come out with very long fingers, and you know what? I'm just gonna through ball. But you can still do the epoxy. I'm just playing the game, but, because sometimes on the inside of the wall, I don't have access, so it has to be an epoxy, it has to be the hole inspection, no big deal. But you epoxy it, or you through bolt it back into the building. And then the 97% that's outside, every fastener, every rivet got replaced or reinforced because it was in good to excellent condition and there was room for another equal-sized bolt next to it. Got it? So this is a concern that's not happening. Your confidence test that you guys have been getting back in the past years has been opinion letters. Because they've been giving you an opinion based on the veneer inspection. Does it look good? Does it look satisfactory? Yeah. Look at all these buildings, that a lot of them, the veneer is still in satisfactory condition. And if there was a little loose mortar, it was the loose mortar around the veneer. No one, I have never seen in all my times here, anybody inspecting beyond the veneer. And that's why you have to load test it. Or do everything possible to avoid the load test. That's what they're doing in Portland. They say, hey, these load tests are insane, they're crazy, they're $20,000, $30,000, depending on the structure. But if you eliminate, you reinforce the structure, there is no load test. There's another building, C channels. And the reason why they opened this all up was not because of the fire escape, it's because they had a bulge in the wall unrelated to some ACs in the window that were feeding water into it, and they created bulge, you know, ice jacking and rust jacking. When they opened it up, look at all that. Load test that, what happens? Because that's what a load test is for, is to test the unknown. So you start load testing after a while because of age, simply because of age. So why don't you just reset the clock? Because a lot of times the member of steel is good. The connections is what gets shot. So if you can just reinforce all the connections, take out all the rust, seal them with 50-year silicone. Now you've done connection management. You've negated the wall connection by putting in a new one. Now what do you got left? Paint jobs. You've sealed all the connections from intrusion. Now as long as the client keeps painting his fire escape, what's going to happen? She'll always pass the 5-year. She'll always have other evidence of strength. But then when you hit the 15, 20, 25-year range, you're going to order a load test? Yeah. Until they do what? Change out all the fasteners again and do what? Reset the clock for another. And maybe by then these buildings might come down because remember, these buildings were not supposed to be here more than 75 years. But then somebody invented duct tape, bubble gum, paper clips,
Baling wire.
baling wire. So,
Cisco, are the insurance companies pushing these guys to do anything? Because
well, they usually have an annual meeting with the federal FDNY, and they don't know about this.
the insurance companies don't look at these as liability.
No, it's not that they don't look at it, they don't know about this. This is our next phase. But if you guys think this is a hand grenade, imagine in a room full of insurance adjusters and insurance people saying, hey, every one of you is holding in their portfolio 10,000 buildings with fake certifications on there. Like, oh, let me send out one of those simple letters, because they got a lot more power than you guys, right? Here's how a typical letter goes. We need a certificate in 30 days that is compliant with the national standard of da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Otherwise, your insurance is canceled. Their 30 days is 30 days. I think it'll be explosive, and you know that's the last thing you want to do is basically walk in and start sparking up matches inside a situation. I think everybody needs to get their feet on the ground first and sort of get a national standard set, so that way by then the insurance companies are going to start looking at the industry standard to basically start getting this back on. Otherwise, you explode the dam, you're going to flood everybody out, and you're not going to be able to handle noise because it'll just. It's been ignored for so long that you better have a 3 to 5 year plan or a 5 to 10 year plan of getting these things back online. And it starts here, like I said. You educate the people that write the violation. You educate the people that enforce the violation. You educate the people that inspect the fire escapes. You educate this was the perfect storm of stupidity, by the way. That's what happened here. Bastard child of egress, nobody gave a hoot. And it just kept going and kept going. Then all of a sudden, Grandma had 75 years. So we tripped over this. You know what I'm saying? And you guys know that this is sort of a peekaboo of what's happening on our national side with bridges out there. right? And everybody's just starting to touch the thing, but it's a national problem. But it's ready, because everybody has all the infrastructure ready to build new bridges, full refurb, put everybody back to work. They never mention fire escapes. And this is what keeps tenants alive, firemen alive, except the landlords, who just get their mail, their checks mailed. So as you can see, this is what our concern was when we worked with Seattle at the beginning, but everybody was still in the opinion. So Seattle is still in that opinion that these confidence tests are coming back, but there's still opinions. And you go to a lot of these fire escapes that you're currently holding certificates on, and all the original rivets are still there, original square head bolt. Some fasteners were changed out, but there was never a theoretical attack. And I'm telling you, you spot repair a fire escape in Seattle, a load test is coming. You fully refurbish this 75 to 100-year-old grandma, no load test. So that's the standard in the nation. Everybody just walks out of one of these classes saying, I only got two options. If I see a spot repair, I don't see an engineer going out of his way to, convince me that he's got other adequate evidence of strength. I'm just gonna keep pulling the load test card. It saves everybody. And it finds these things. Because when you load test a fire escape that looks like this, here's a load test we did in California, 10-story. And this is one of the first things they want us to do, is to verify. Now, if you look at the hole there, made by a 3/4 hammer drill. I needed 2 or 3 hammer drills to basically get enough so I can sneak my camera inside there and do what? What is this rabbit hole? What am I looking at? Right? Verify the connection. I'm like, okay, throw the thing in there, examine, But if I take that same drill and go out 6 inches over there, blast the 3/4 hole all the way through, put in a through bolt, new through bolt, mechanically angle fasten it back to the bracket, keep the original, don't disturb it. What have I done? I've negated the need to verify a connection for you on a 100-year-old building. I don't want to touch it. I want to let sleeping dogs lie. You need to reattach. Now, this is single activity. I can get under any fire escape, put in a 12 to 15 foot angle of 3x3, let's say. Every 2 or 3 feet, I've got epoxy or through bolts. Stick it underneath the entire row of balcony, bolt the entire angle back to the building, wherever it's convenient on the inside, and then mechanically fasten every one of the brackets with a mechanical connection back to itself. Leave the original. And so what I did, I've unified now the whole fire escape on this 100-year-old structure, which is even stronger than single connection. I can unify it with a bracket. Every now and then you get to a situation where the wall is crap. So you know what you gotta do? You gotta leg it to the ground, up against the building on the back. You put a leg up against the wall, mechanically fasten it to every floor, all the way down to the ground, then you put it on a sono. The outside nose of the fire escape, put an angle on the nose, all the way down to the floor, on top of a sono. This is a freestanding structure. I don't care about the wall, which is a piece of crap now because it's bulging and it's doing one of these crazy things on you. Because in order for me to load test a fire escape, what must you pass? You must pass an envelope study that says your 100-year-old wall is ready for my 100-pound load test. And by the way, if you follow the guidelines of Portland, they don't want 100 pounds per square foot, they want 200 pounds per square foot.
Do they base that on anything, or is it?
Yeah, I know they base that on. They base that on, load testing bridges and all this stuff. So that's an industry standard load test requirement of almost like double load testing, or exceeding what it was built for, double it. So they took a national criteria for load testing, not fire escapes.
Okay.
And they say, oh, you must build this thing to basically get 1.67, of the load. So if it's 100, you got to go 167 pounds. So they round it up to 200. So when you ask them where they got this information, they're going to tell you, oh, that's how we load test bridges. So we just morphed it back to these baby fire escapes hanging on these 100-year-old walls. So we're really pushing the other evidence of strength all the time to say there is alternatives. And the alternative, and the last alternative is, this thing's crap, this wall's crap. So we're just gonna leg it on the back to the ground, we're gonna leg it on the front to the ground, put it on sonos, it's a freestanding structure, the building can burn and fall to the ground. The fire escape would just sit there, because you just put legs. That's the final solution. Okay? on some of these when people are like, oh, my wall, and I don't wanna do a $25,000 envelope study of my wall and check the course, whatever, you're like, don't worry about it.
Like a freestanding.
Freestanding leg to the ground fire escape. You got it? So, just put it over there. You start implementing that, it's other evidence of strength, no more load testing. This is what it looks like inside of the rabbit hole. Got it? You know what you're looking at, right? Through bolts into the building. Got it? So this is us load testing, 3,000 pounds per platform, using a 7,000 pound truck. Measurements before. You know what the deflection can be? No more than 3/16. 3/16. So we started load testing for this.
What?
Of an inch. So we started, you have to do measurements before, measurements during, measurements after. That's why we're doing all these things, right? And I'm like, nah, this thing's gonna deflect like an inch, you know? It doesn't. Yet it says on the Portland one, it says that you have to watch it an hour after you've load tested and see if it regains 75% of its original deflection. And I'm reading that, I'm like, well, that's contrary to what we did in California, because when you load tested it, there was no deflection. There's not, you're not seeing the, and I'm like, but when you deal with bridges and such, they're made to deflect, when trucks and stuff go over, there's always that, and I'm like, so it's so brand new as far as who's really gonna work out, because you get the mix of, extremists that wanna basically load test it like they're load testing, the rocket ship to the moon, and then you got the other guys that are just eyeballing it and saying, what's all the big noise about? And then you got you guys are the test rats to basically see what all the craziness is gonna come from it. So here's a load test using cables, and that's very simple. 10-story building, right? And this is us lifting the back of a truck. He's underneath. We're testing the 9th story, a cable all the way up, and we're testing it for 3,000 pounds, and we're using this little load cell.
So where's all the information come from? Is it like this, structural engineer standards or handbooks?
Doesn't exist.
Or something, because for us to start requiring things, that's why I want to leave it up to the engineer or the licensed professional. Because for
Doesn't
me to start
exist.
saying you have to do this, this, and this.
It doesn't
like,
exist.
That's
That's why we started the National Fire Escape Association to say it doesn't exist.
What struck me about that guy, standard putting a load on the truck, nice hard hat.
See, I knew he was gonna pick on that. He was doing the 9th floor. He was going through all
So
the
he'll have
floors.
time to bail out of the way of it.
Well, that's true. No, we basically on this, when you'll see on the fire escapes, we basically have to tie that platform has to tie off to the one above and has to tie off to the one below. In case there is any failure, use the other structures to hold onto it using cabling. So that's where you walk up to a site, you bring 5,000 pounds, you put it on the ground, then you start lifting this 5,000 pounds off the ground. You know what I'm saying? An inch. And that's how you put the load. Instead of bringing these bags up there, so that's one way. Water bags or sand bags on each floor, or if possible, you do it on the ground. You put the weight on the ground, you start using cabling to do that. This is one we did for Harvard University in Cambridge. Now this one we purposely left with Harvard knowing exactly what we were doing. I said, can I use this as a test model? I want to fix this fire escape, change all the fasteners except the very top part, and now I want to load test it using 50-pound sandbags. So 7 men, starting at 7 in the morning, sandbagging. And what's the worst part about the sandbags? Guess where you play?
Put them in place.
You're
that's the first
putting them in place.
You gotta climb on it.
You gotta climb on it, right? So here, and we did, we documented it, we recorded it to basically show Harvard, who is now no longer accepting his opinion letters anymore, to say, here's a load test on a baby. And if this thing was a 10-story monster, give me 20, 30 grand. We did the Bob Hope building in LA. I think that's like 15 stories. We did the load test there. They spent millions of dollars refurbing the whole thing, and then they wanted a load test. Even though we fully refurbished, they still wanted a load test.
So now we're loading onto a stair. We're doing a concentrated load of every other tread, 200 pounds.
So you
Hey, Tom,
start,
we've about started. You want to note that the staircase is...
you gotta measure, you gotta take measurements, and then you gotta get it all up to the top, and then you basically start working down the fire escape, you know, you just keep moving
So did you
low.
take them through the interior and then up to, or how'd you get them?
Up the fire escape.
Just up the fire escape and then took them back down?
Again, it's just, every fire escape is different, you have to crane it in, you have to, oh my God, and this is over a roof. Got it? So, this is fire escapes that are missing components. This is that New York case where a fireman fell through. What happened, there was a fire in this building, there it is. The fireman had to go up there and basically smash that window so that they can vent, but there was a woman and a child up there. As he ran up the fire escape, a young kid, 27, he fell through 3 treads over here.
Ouch.
Smashed, came crashing down here, climbed back up, saved the woman, brought her back down. Basically, right after all the adrenaline wore off, he was crippled. I mean, whatever, shattered some of the spine. So the uniqueness about this case is that here's what happened. This wasn't, everybody thought this was a simple case of, got hurt at work. He sued the owner directly for negligence because he was able to prove with the metallurgist, with an inspection, which we did 2 years later, that the fire escape was never maintained.
Right, so it's outside the fire.
Before, during, and after, and he won the case. So the information that we got from the metallurgist is now where I'm going to prove to you guys how a fire escape rusts from the inside out. And how simple this really is when you're looking at a fire escape, you don't have to get on it. So 2 things that we're going to talk about is when you look at a rusty fire escape and it started from the inside out, the connections are what? Suspect.
They're done.
Right? Because we've proven with a case study that all fire escapes rust from the inside out, never from the outside in. Is that correct? The second thing we're gonna be showing you on this fire escape is just how the connections take 25 years to grow and why they take 25 years. So we're gonna show, and again, a metallurgist has this information for you.
You mean
That-
75 years ago, they didn't have 50-year caulk?
50 or what?
They're caulking the silicone?
No, they actually didn't.
I'm joking.
Well, you know what their caulking was? It was a paint job. And we're gonna show you why, as soon as a fire escape that is bolted, and you put stiff paint on it, and it heats up in the summer and does this,
Right.
and it cools down in the winter and does this, how it just snaps the paint. And that's why it needs routine maintenance to reseal it.
Right.
Otherwise, as soon as water gets in there, now you put caulking that stays pliable for years, what happens? So that's what caulking. And one of the things we're studying now is using rubber gaskets, the same rubber roof material. Whenever possible, primarily on the treads, we want to put a rubber gasket in there, which lasts even longer. Okay? So let's take a look at the case study of what happened here. And you won this case, by the way, but we were able to keep this information to basically train you guys about surface rust and what it really means. Surface rust is the last thing you see on a fire escape all the connections are suspect, and square head bolts and rivets, which means what? What didn't they do in the 25th to 50th birthday of that building that they did do to the electric, the plumbing, the roof, the boiler, the windows?
Update the fasteners.
Exactly. So you already know that. So you're walking in on any building around here, you look up and say, it's fully painted. Great. But you keep looking and you see square head bolts and fasteners. What do you got? The fire escape was never maintained. So this is the class that we gave. Now, when we went there 2 years later, look at all the treads that were falling when we got to the fire escape 2 years after this guy got critically injured. So this was evidence that we used to basically give to the case, and again, the case settled after this came out. But basically what happens is all fire escapes are built with 20-foot pieces of steel, unpainted from the mill. You get it there and you cut it into 24 inches, you cut it to various sizes, you take the 2 pieces of metal, you put them one over the other, you pop a bolt in it, or you pop a rivet in it, or you weld it. What don't you ever do in between the 2 surfaces?
Seal it.
Right, you never prime it, because if you primed it and welded it, it'll get burnt paint and stuff, but it's not uncommon for you to create all these connections and all these things so it's unpainted connections. Then when you have the whole thing assembled, the tread, the bracket, the support, the rail, what do? You prime it, you paint it. Sounds pretty simple, right? But in some of these connections, primarily these and these, what happens is never any paint in there, so as soon as you get, and have you ever used a plumber's torch on copper piping and you start sweating it, and all of a sudden it looks like the metal is wet? You do that to iron, it's the same thing. So there's already a moisture content to iron, and all it needs is air and water for it to generate rust. And that's why you put a paint job over it, so because you stop the air from getting to steel, what happens? It doesn't oxidize. But as soon as you apply air to it, what happens? Starts to oxidize. So when the summer sun, you guys get sun once in a while here, don't you?
August.
2 days a year.
The day after 4th of July.
You guys know that the tour bus, which I've taken the tours here, that you guys own the most sunglasses in the US, right? Yeah, when you take the tour, they say you guys buy more sunglasses here
We're optimistic.
than anywhere.
Cautiously optimistic.
No, it's because you can't find the last pair you bought.
Oh, that's true.
You know what I'm saying? You're just so happy it's sunshine, you're like, what is this thing called sun? I gotta, you buy from, any drugstore, you'll just buy glasses just so you can enjoy a sunny day, because
True.
you're not gonna go home and get your Ray-Bans, because you're like, nah, I'm used to driving in gloom, you know?
After what the rest of the country's had to live with this year, we're pretty lucky to be that.
This weather is very similar to Ireland. If anybody's ever spent time in Ireland, this is Irish weather. This is just, and my sister married a guy from Ireland who lives in Northern Ireland, and when I was there with my 2 kids, and we were just going to the park, and it started drizzling. I mean that heavy drizzle. And I'm like, oh, we should go because it's. He goes, what? He goes, yeah, dude, it's gonna rain. He goes, this isn't rain. We paint houses in this weather. He goes, Ireland's the only place you can go out and look out your front door, it's raining, turn and go out the back door and it's sunny. Why? Because it's just gloom, it's just wet all the time.
They even paint fire escapes in that weather, right?
And they paint fire escapes, with the water-based paint now. So this is what happens in the first 5 years, guys. The water and the poo and the leaves, you're supposed to scrape that away and paint it. Routine maintenance. Does anybody do it? No. 5 to 10 years later, 15 years later, that has grown because you never stopped it. It's grown and eaten on all your treads.